without further ado, I would like to bring up our guest of honor. I'm sure you guys have heard of her before. We have in the house the founder and CEO, Jaclyn Johnson from Create and Cultivate. So if you want to come on up. And we have, talking to her tonight, we have Katie D'Amato from Alaska Airlines. All right, yeah, take your seat.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
I'm so excited to get to talk to Jaclyn like this.
I know, this is so fun.
I always see her on the other side. She's always in this role.
I know,
so
I don't do this often.
I'm a little nervous to be my best Jaclyn tonight and ask questions. I did steal some from her, so I'll give you the credit where the credit is due.
I'll do my best.
Alaska has partnered with Create and Cultivate on many events, and so I've had the opportunity to work with Jaclyn from a brand side, and I've seen her in action, so it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you to the Riveter. I just wanted to start out with kind of setting the stage of how you started out. You've been quoted as saying that Create and Cultivate was never supposed to be a business. Your life was never supposed to be like this, but how did it become that way? Because it is certainly a couple of businesses now.
Yeah, it's definitely my life now. So how many of you know what Create and Cultivate is? Okay, so I'm not going to give you the full spiel. So I had a different company called No Subject, which was a marketing and events agency. That was my first business. I started it when I was 23 as a young female founder, just trying to figure it out. And essentially what happened was I went through a lot of difficult times starting that business and went online and did what a lot of us, I'm sure, do. And I Googled for help. I was like, help, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And nothing online looked, felt, or spoke to me as a young millennial female founder. I mean, it was LegalZoom advice, CNBC advice. Nothing was relevant to my business and what I was doing. And so I said, well, this sucks. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I thought other women might need it too. And so I emailed a few of my friends and said, hey, do you guys want to all get together and, chat about running a company and what we're going through and what we might need to, kind of just vent about, but also, swap secrets. And that was the first Create and Cultivate. It was just 50 people in a room figuring it out. And I did that for 4 years. Made approximately $0. In fact, lost money. But it was just a fun thing I was doing for my other company. And it honestly took on a life of its own. Yeah. And then from there, yeah.
And so you were 23 when you did this, which is remarkable. Congrats. Do you think your age had anything to do with starting that out? Do you think that you would do those same things today, years later?
So I'm 155 years old now.
I didn't want to be today.
It feels that way. So I think when you start a company, when you're in your early 20s, you have this benefit of having nothing to lose. And you also have the benefit of naivete, where you're kind of going into things and thinking, well, I don't know, so I'm just going to figure it out and come in guns blazing and just do what I want to do. And I think that's an amazing, amazing quality. It gets a little bit more difficult further down the line when you have more stuff on the line. But I think it's amazing. I think one of the things I run into all the time with people is they're like, well, I have this idea, I built this site, I have this product, but it's not ready yet. It's not ready to launch. And I'm always like, just put it out there. I have pivoted so many times in my different companies, launched with taglines that I changed immediately, launched with tickets that didn't make sense, crashed sites, you name it. You just have to get it out there. You have to start by starting, which is something I always say. And I think that was something that I did really well with my first company. I just put it out there. And then I was like, when someone's like, hey, I need you to put together a dinner, I was like, absolutely, we do event production. And then I went to our site, added, we do event production. And then I literally Googled, what do I need to do for event production? I just figured it out. And I think saying yes and figuring it out is honestly 90% of the job when you're running a company.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you were starting out, what was the first thing that you did?
Built a website,
Website.
Definitely. And then also all the boring things that you should absolutely do is trademark, actually start a company legally, whether you're an LLC or an S-Corp or whatever it is that you're doing. I think those are the things we sometimes forget about because we're just like, oh, I'll just figure that out later. Do it from the start. It's so, so important. I run into companies that explode overnight and they don't own the trademark to their name. And that's so brutal. And you've maybe seen companies change their names. And you're like, why did they do that? It's because they didn't own the trademark. I'm pretty sure we own our trademark. I'm just kidding. We do. Don't go Google it. Don't do anything. I think all that stuff is very important. But I think like with my first company, it was me, a laptop, and an idea, and I was just figuring it out. And honestly, sometimes I feel that way still. I think, when it comes to running a business, now I'm at the point where I don't do every job, but there will be a point where you do every job. You will be HR, you will be finance, you will be the president and CEO, you will be the business development person, you will be all of those different things. And that's an incredible lesson because as you're growing your business and you're bringing on those team members, you know what that job is and you know what that job takes. And so you're able to kind of build and grow because you've been the expert at all those different things.
So that leads me into, if you have an idea, or you're a designer, you're a creative, you might not have that finance business background. What do you say to somebody who is the creator or the maker of a business versus the business person, and somebody who is a business person but doesn't have the kind of maker side?
Absolutely. So I was the creative at the beginning, and then I learned to become the business person along the way. And that was through experience and through research and education, all those different things of learning like, what's a P&L, what's a KPI, what's ROI, what are all these things we're talking about, and just kind of like Googling it and figuring it out. But one thing I will say, no matter if you never want to be the creative, you never want to be the business person, that's cool, that's fine, but you have to know and understand the numbers. You have to fall in love with the numbers to be a business person. And whether you want to make a lot of money or break even or do whatever it is that you want to do, you have to, in some capacity, understand how your business works from a financial perspective. And if you really don't ever want to be part of that, find a partner who does. I think that's really important. Like, bring in the experts. I think, even for me, like, I love the financial part of the business. I don't want to do it. Like, I just, no thanks. And even HR, I'm like, oh, I can't, what are we talking about? And so I bring in the experts in that, position when you're available to. And I think what's so beautiful now is that there's all these companies starting up where, I met this girl on my book tour who started an HR company for small businesses. Because HR is your last hire on your mind. You're like, yeah, right, I don't need an HR person. I need people who are going to bring in money. And so HR people, are hard to come by. So you're like, I can bring in this person who like once a month comes in, does her thing, and handles it for me. So you can do that now. There's so many resources available for companies, where you don't have to be making millions of dollars to have infrastructure and the right people in place to get your company going.
And is HR one of those things, or are there other things that you were like, this is a department that I really needed at the beginning and I just didn't know it?
Yeah, definitely. HR was definitely one of it. Accounting was definitely one of it. I literally, me and our accountant, Joanne, AKA my mom, for many years did the accounting at Create and Cultivate, which was embarrassing, but also amazing. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh God, I gotta get an accountant, I gotta get HR, and then I also gotta get, for our business specifically, when we started launching social media, we had someone doing social media, also doing our marketing, also doing our web design, and then it was like, hey, this is really overwhelming. We're doing a lot of things. And then you start to hire accordingly based on need and demand and the spaces that you want to be in.
Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of your team members, and I will say they are remarkable. And I know that hiring is a huge part of anybody's business. How do you approach finding talent, keeping talent? What are you looking for when you're hiring people? How do you build that team that's going to do what you want them to do as a founder?
Hiring is the hardest part of the business, 100%. I would say I'm brutally honest in our interviews, almost to the point where like our COO is like, shut up. Just shut up. Because I'm like, it's really hard. It's a startup. You're not going to be hanging with celebrities. Like, I just like rattle it out. I'm like, how much can you deadlift? Like, everyone's like, can you get out of here? But we are a startup. And I think a lot of times people think we're this massive company. Like, we get emails sometimes that are like, as such a large corporation. And we're like, what are you talking about? Like, we're literally like 15 people in a room. But I think it's really difficult to find people first and foremost, you need to tell your staff that this is a founder-led business. That is a very different beast and animal than any other job they will have, because no one will care as much as a founder of a company. And so when they come in, every little thing matters, like the period at the end of the sentence, the signage that they're creating. And you have to be able to distinguish and draw a line and also set expectation for those employees. So for us, role clarity is hugely important, and coming into that from the very beginning, saying, here's your role. Role expectation is hugely important. Goal setting, review periods, all these things that you don't think are important are so important to employees, and figuring that out. And then I would say the other thing that was really amazing advice that someone gave me was, you should be looking to hire 6 months ahead of the curve. And for so long, I was hiring when we needed it. So it was like, oh my God, the kitchen's on fire, we need to fix it, let's get someone immediately. And then you're hiring because you need it. And you're just like, okay, this person's good, let's just bring him in. You need to hire 6 months ahead. So we have jobs on our site that we don't need, but we might in 6 months. So we keep those jobs up so that we can have good candidates rolling in and have good conversations happening all the time. So I think that was honestly some of the best advice I ever got. So you should, I don't know, think about that.
Write that down. Write that down. How would you describe your culture at work and the way, kind of the rules of play that you guys have internally that gets your work done?
Yeah, so we are all women. Men don't really apply for Create and Cultivate, which is interesting. But we basically are a work hard, play hard culture. We are in the events business, which is a very, very brutal business. It's long hours, it's physical labor, and it doesn't matter what position or title or anything you are or pay grade, like you are doing all of it. Like I am picking up trash on the day of the conferences.
Jaclyn was moving furniture a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
She's like interviewing Martha Stewart in 10 minutes, and she's also moving chairs. And I was like, Jaclyn, let me help you out.
And I was like, absolutely not. No, that's the whole point though. And I think that's it's top-down leadership. So like when my staff sees me moving furniture, like they're gonna jump in and help and know that there is no job too big, too small when it comes to the company. And I think all of the women at our company are so aligned with the mission and the vision of Create and Cultivate. So for them, the beauty of the job is not only that we get to do all these cool, fun things, but it's also their voices are a contribution to the company. So we have women, we have new moms, we have people in their early 20s, and so we are catering to this demographic and these type of women. So what's on your mind? What do you care about? Who would you like to see speak? It's an incredible focus group all the time as well, and I think what's so satisfying about the company is that you have incredible ownership over your job, a lot of responsibility, but you get to see your ideas come to life, which I think is sometimes rare when you're working in a much larger corporation.
So that kind of tells you what kind of boss you are. But you started this company at such a young age. You didn't really have that kind of traditional boss example to pull from. So how did you find your mentors? How did you, is this just an inherent kind of boss lady, founder, and character? Or how are you seeking out other women or other leaders, other bosses to help you kind of figure out what kind of leader you wanted to be?
Yeah, I didn't have that much corporate experience before I started my own company. I did have one boss that also was a mentor to me. His name was John Foley, and you might know him because he's the CEO of Peloton now. But he was the CEO of Pronto when I worked there, which was a startup you've never heard of, but it was a competitor with a little company called Amazon. It didn't work out for them, but it was an amazing job, and he was an incredible resource and inspiration to me because he was a very entrepreneurial person within a larger company, and then he obviously went on to start Peloton. And so he, for me, was always such a great source of inspiration. He's the one who convinced me to move to Los Angeles. He got me my first client when I started my company. So those kind of people are invaluable. And he was one of the first sponsors. Peloton was one of the first sponsors of Create and Cultivate, which was incredible. So you have to find those people that will lift you up and support you no matter where you go, no matter if you're working for them anymore. And I think that's something I've gone off and seen a lot of my employees leave and start their own companies, which is super rewarding and something where I always kind of ask that in interviews, like, do you want to be an entrepreneur? And I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, you should work for a small startup, and you should just watch the founder. Watch what they do, watch how they operate, watch how they act, watch how they email, and just absorb that. Because anyone who's worked for Create and Cultivate for over a year has gotten a literal MBA in entrepreneurship because they've seen it all and they understand how it all works. And so I think for me, a lot of it was based on my fellow entrepreneurs, truly, because I couldn't really reach out to, CEOs of companies and say, hi, I'm starting this company. Can you have 20 minutes of your time? They're like, ignore. So I think for me, some of the women that were on their way up, when I was on my way up and starting companies, we were just talking about is, Jen Rubio from Away Luggage, who was starting her business when I started my business, and we had a lot of conversations about that. My friend Janine, who has a company, she does trend forecasting for the outdoor space, started her company. I've seen it grow along the same side. So we're like, what are you doing for that? How are you handling this? She's like, have you ever done that? And those conversations are so important because we're all figuring it out together. And then, you kind of learn as you go. I mean, I hate to say I didn't have a mentor because I really didn't, but I think, I've learned over time, and I think as a boss, as an employee, as just a modern working woman, you get better over time. You learn how to handle things better. You learn how to negotiate better. You know how to say no to things, when to say yes to things. And I think I've just really gotten to that point through just true baptism by fire experience.
And so that idea of saying yes to things, like when you're starting out and you need the business or you want to grow because that's what success is, how do you know when to not say yes and when to say no and when saying yes is too much? Mm-hmm.
So for us, what we do is our first question is, how does this provide value to our community? So if the answer is it provides value in this way, it doesn't provide value, it doesn't get to the next step. And then if it gets to the next step, it says, does this provide meaningful, is this meaningful to our bottom line in the sense of money? So once we get through all those parameters, we sort of ask these questions, then we'll decide to say yes to things. And I think we've been really lucky because we're kind of snobby when it comes to our partners. Luckily, Alaska's amazing, but sometimes we'll work with brands.
She has to say that. I'm sitting right here.
But we'll work with brands who literally are like, here's our setup for Create and Cultivate, and it's a pop-up banner, a folding table, and I'm like, I don't think so. Not only because it doesn't look good, but also because I'm like, this isn't gonna do well for you. This is a waste of your money, honestly. You wanna engage with our audience, you have to show up. You have to show up. You have to put money into it. You have to spend money to make money. You're already paying us. Show up in a better way for our community and for your brand. So we have specific rules about ways brands will show up, ways that they'll speak to our consumers, and ways that they market to them. And so I think we've been very protective of that, and it's served our brand well.
So you have Create and Cultivate, you have the book, Work Party, which is also its own kind of social platform, and you have the personal brand of Jaclyn Johnson. How do you prioritize where to spend your time, where to invest your energy, what takes center stage that day of the week, how to balance the growth of which one is going to move ahead versus take a step back?
My personal brand always takes a step back. It's always taking the back seat. But I think for me is at the end of the day, I am an entrepreneur. I love running businesses. So that's what I love first and foremost. For me, Create and Cultivate is my baby. So that always takes center stage. How we're building it, how we're growing it, what we're going to do next. Work Party is my latest baby that I love so much. And we have really exciting big plans for Work Party. But just doing the podcast has been really rewarding. Seeing people reading the book, talking about it has been super rewarding. And long term for us, the goal behind Work Party is to eventually catch our woman at every life stage. So Create and Cultivate primarily, I would say, is 25 to 35, women who maybe are on their second career or quitting their job, starting a business, all these different things. We do have a large part of our audience that is 18 to 24, and they also attend Create and Cultivate, which is great. But they're looking for different advice, a more specific subset of questions and panels, and sort of college women at the end of the day. So our plan for Work Party is eventually this will roll out as a college-focused brand. So for us, and as a marketer, what you need to think about when you're looking at your customer is what is their life stage and how am I staying with them throughout that life stage? How are they going to continue to buy my product? Because you don't want to age out. And so really thinking about that for us has been really important, is how are we capturing every life stage and also servicing that person better at that life stage they're in.
So you work with tons of brands throughout Create and Cultivate, and you see them show up in a lot of different ways. What type of content or services are in demand right now, and what do you think will be in demand next?
Experiential is really hot. Everyone wants an event, which is awesome. I would also say influencer marketing is everyone's like, get me an influencer. I think those are the two hottest right now. I think if you looked 5 years ago, it was banner ads. Like we just wanted to ad buy. We just want to ad buy. And I think people are starting to realize like native content's where it's at. Organic relationships is where it's at. And so creating these experiences, content, influencer, and also these like 360 experiences where, oh wait, I'm getting all of these in the same thing, which is really what Create and Cultivate is, have been really impactful for brands. One thing that I think a lot of brands most recently have been interested in, which I think is the smart approach, is email acquisition. So emails are so important to your business. If you don't have a newsletter, start one. It's so important to be capturing quality email addresses as you're building your company. And so for brands and our partners, that's really important to them as well.
It's really interesting. I thought like email was dead, or like this
It's
new
back.
generation doesn't even have an email address.
Does anybody remember Daily Candy? No?
Yes. R.I.P. Daily
R.I.P.
Candy. I think I
Ahead of its
I think I
time.
applied to be a contributor like 4 times. I was like, I'm just gonna write articles and send them to you. You can publish them for free. When they opened in Seattle, I was like, I'm your girl. Then they closed. So, yeah. So I'm sure you get asked all the time, what's the best advice you've ever received? I am a firm believer that like the big lessons happen when terrible mistakes happen. That's how you learn. So what's the worst advice that you've ever received? And what changes did you make, or changes to your habits or whatever that was a result of that like very terrible advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice we got very early on was that we should go out and raise money. I think we're a completely self-funded company. Everyone was raising money, like 5 million, 10 million, everyone. I was like, oh my God, yes, absolutely. That's like what we're gonna go do. And so many people were like, you should go do this, you should meet with this person. And like all these people like offered to give us a lot of money. And we turned it down because at the end of the day, we were profitable and we knew what we were doing, and we didn't need, like we couldn't, if you can't say I need money for X, Y, and Z, you should not be raising money. You need to know exactly what you'll be inputting that money into. And for us, I was like, I couldn't really figure it out. I was like, we kind of got this, actually. I think we're okay. And so realizing that was really important to me. And so I think I really thought that year 1, year 2, where I was like, God, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go out. Because everyone was doing it. But I think listening to my gut and saying, you know, I'd rather own more of my company and see how this goes and kind of go from there and make my own decisions. You know, I think that's so important.
I find it really refreshing that you talk so openly about money. I think it's a topic that not just women, but people in general, my grandmother would die if I even told you, you know, these shoes are from Old Navy. But you are so open about talking about finance, and I think it's a really refreshing thing. What drives that in you, and what advice can you give to people who are nervous about having the money conversation when they're starting a business?
Yeah, women have to talk about money. Like, we have to stop being nervous about it. We have to stop saying, like, oh, I don't want to say that. I don't want to do that. It's the only way I knew how to grow my business. I remember for so long at my first company, I was charging like $3,000 a month retainers forever. I was just like, this is it. This is great. This is great. And one of my friends who also ran an agency out of New York is like, our minimums are $10,000. I was like, what? She like showed me her deck. I'm like, we're doing the same thing. She's like, yeah, girl, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. I didn't know. I had no one else to tell. Who am I going to talk to about that? I'm not going out and asking other marketing agencies like how much they're spending. I literally remember the first client after that I went to, I was on the phone with, and I was like, so our retainers are $10,000 a month. And they were like, okay. I was like, shit. I was like, for so long, I've been undercharging. But it was because she shared that information, I was able to go out and ask for more money. And I think if women are talking about it, whether it's like you're an employee and it's salary and all these different things, or even like negotiating, you know, different contracts or whatever it is, ask around. How much did you charge for that? How much did you pay for that? What's the standard going rate for that? You know, I was like, I haven't had a job in a really long time. How much do we pay employees these days? Like, I don't know. So it's like asking all my friends. You know, I think it's so important. I want to say this other thing, which is a little bit off topic but similar, is that I think we have to stop shaming other women for making money. I think so often we see other women being successful or, you know, building these big brands, or people talking about them making money, and we're either internally like, I wish that was me, or like I'm annoyed, or we're just like already like, wow, you really are like blah blah blah, like, you know, whatever it is. More women making more money means that they can spend more money with other women. So I know for us, that we hire a female small business owned florist that we work with all the time. We're able to support other small business owners. I'm able to give back to that community in a way that I wouldn't be able to if brands weren't paying me. And I think sometimes, we get people shaming us for partnering with certain brands, and I'm just like, but you're not seeing the big picture. And so I think that's really, really important. Support your friends making money, support people who aren't your friends making money. I think that's how we'll eventually see more women at the top with more budget making change.
I love that. I think it's a really nice way to look at, there's a big movement around like women supporting women, but we're oftentimes really hard to one another. So we want to support each other, but then we're the worst to one another.
And I think for so long there was this narrative, and I've even had this thought in my early 20s where we've all seen the movies. There's only one of us at the top, right? And like we're all just like figuring out, clawing each other down, like Devil Wears Prada style, like to get to the Paris Fashion Week or whatever. Like, it's not true. Like, there's actually room for everyone. And, I get women who email me all the time things that pop up that are very similar to Create and Cultivate. And they always email it to me, and I'm just like, good for them. Like at the end of the day, you have to, and our good friend Maxie said this at one of our events, and I thought it was so genius. She's like, if you're a founder, you have to be a horse with blinders. You have to just focus on your business, focus on the work, not care about what anyone else is doing, and just do you. Because if you're like, well, that girl's starting a thing, and this is it, great. There's more buzz and excitement about whatever it is that you're building then. Great.
Oh, Maxie.
Maxie.
She is so
Follow
good.
her, Maxie McCoy.
Maxie
She's just
McCoy.
a joy.
Yeah, awesome. So you've been doing your thing for over 10 years. It's going really well. But you were a marketer first and foremost. You were on the leading edge of social and influencers and all the things. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the industry that you are dealing with today that you didn't deal with then, or that you are like, we're just dealing with a different playing field when it comes to marketing or brands or even the customer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so many different things. I think first and foremost is brands want analytics, right? Like they want to know how things are performing, and we're living in a little bit of an ambiguous world, especially when it comes to influencers and buzz and marketing and all these things. And the tools haven't really kept up with the momentum of how much these platforms are growing. So I think for us, I'm constantly challenging us, like how can we build better reporting for our partners and really show more value, because Create and Cultivate's a one-day experience and it's truly magical. And I've had a million emails of people who are like, I never heard of Biossance and now I use Biossance all the time. I recommend all my friends and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, amazing. Can I screenshot this and send it to our client? Because that's not translating anywhere else. It's just this, like the rule of 7 we were talking about backstage. But there is this rule of 7. There is such thing as seeing something on your a Facebook ad, seeing your friend at a party on Instagram, then seeing an ad for their website, going to an event where they're there, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that brand. Yeah, I'm going to buy that brand. I'm going to spend money with that brand. And that's how good marketing truly works. And it's not quantifiable. You can't show that on a report, which I think is very frustrating on our end because we want to be able to really show those results. So I think that's a real challenge.
Who, on the brand side, what companies or products, who's doing it really well? And who's doing it really well?
Alaska Airlines.
You know how to say that.
No, but truly, you guys are doing it so
them.
well.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the Rule of 7. You guys are everywhere. I see you always. I think you've been really smart about creating buzz and everything that you're doing. I would say the other brand that we're working with right now is MasterCard, which we're really excited about. We hosted a small business marketplace with Teresa back there, which was awesome. She's an incredible hat maker, if you don't know her. But she was one of our vendors at our small business marketplace in New York. It was such a fun and exciting thing to build with them, to give the opportunity for 5 brands to be on site at Create and Cultivate and, obviously showcase their goods, which was super fun. I think, again, Glossier, we were talking about it like backstage, they crush. And I just think brands that are really building not only great product or services or experiences, but building their own brand on top of it, where you're just like, that's so Glossier. If anyone says that about your brand ever, that's the best thing ever. Because a lot of people will say, like, that's so Create and Cultivate. And I'm like, yes. Because you work at that. That's really, really hard. You got to get your grid right. You're like always trying to make your personal brand really good or all that stuff. So I think that's really, really hard to get to, and it takes time. It takes a lot of effort. But I think, those are the brands doing it really well.
Nice. Got to get your grid right.
Gotta get your grid right.
Step one, ladies, step one. You've been really fortunate, and you've interviewed a lot of people. I've seen you interview Martha Stewart, Tan France, who was magic.
A dream.
Ashley Graham. Who's the one that you want to like? Who's next?
I mean,
If
Oprah.
you could interview anyone, yeah.
Like Oprah, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm waiting. I think Oprah and Michelle Obama are like my holy grail.
Yeah.
Like we'll get there. Well, I was gonna say in terms of people I have interviewed, like I mean, Martha was unreal. I was asking her about imposter syndrome. I'm like, so imposter
The
syndrome.
best. I've told so many people about this.
She's like,
Walk it out, tell
imposter
them.
syndrome is like, when you don't feel like you can be in the room, whatever. I'm like, oh, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? She's like, no.
She was like, everybody in this room is just impostering me.
Yeah, exactly. Like she just was like, you shouldn't even know what that is. I was like, Martha, you're so right. But yeah, I mean, Issa Rae was incredible too. I got to interview her when she was, it was like peak Insecure success, and she was just incredible. It's really been awesome, and I think what's so incredible about all these women is that they're genuinely down to share their experience in a really real way.
So this is a question that you always ask of them, so I'm going to ask it of you. What is your current guilty pleasure Instagram follow?
Oh my God, there's so many. I mean, Comments by Celebs is definitely...
What is it?
Comments by Celebs. Do you follow it? So good. So basically, it's this Instagram channel that just screen grabs comments that celebs make on other celebs' content. It's so good.
It's like
so
overheard
good.
in LA,
yes,
but in the
it's like a
comment section?
version of that.
Love it.
It's really, really good.
Great, I love that. I'm going to do a little rapid fire with Jaclyn. So this is also the point where you guys can start thinking of your questions for her, because we are going to open it up soon. Jaclyn, in every article that I've read about you, you are connected to this lovely little thing called Millennial Pink. What is the next Millennial Pink?
Well, first and foremost, Millennial Pink is not going anywhere. It's my favorite. I'm very excited to do our office reveal because it's very Millennial Pink. Yeah, it's funny because legitimately every article is like, and drenched in Millennial Pink. I'm like, oh, guys. It's a little basic, but fine. But
Sure,
I think
you own it.
I'm
thing.
like,
Lean
I
into
will
it.
always. I think like the next is like that kind of chartreusey, mustardy yellow that we're seeing
Ochre?
everywhere.
Ochre?
Yeah.
J. Crew would call it ochre in the catalog.
Ochre?
I was going to say that, yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm into that for sure.
Who is your current girl crush, boss babe? All those
Ooh.
terms.
I'm really into Deepika Mutyala. I don't know if you guys know her, but she has a company called Tinted, and it started as a platform really exploring diversity in beauty and or the lack thereof. And then she's recently just launched her own product line. So I'm super proud and excited for her. And she's been a long time CNC participant, speaker, and I just think what she's doing is really cool.
Awesome. What is one app that you use on your phone for business that you like? It's your go-to.
So it's so lame. Like I wish I was into like Asana and Task and all these. I'm not. I'm like a notebook person. But what I do is I use the Notes app on every single call I have. I just literally take notes in it, and then I can search it and like go back to it and find it. I have all my little quick links in there for things I need to respond to. So yeah, it's like pretty basic, but it's good.
That's good. Do we want to open it up for questions?
Oh yeah.
Make sure it's hot on.
I mean, the rapid fire, I could keep going, but I want to
Thank
give you
you.
ladies time.
You guys are so on top of the AV situation.
Hi. First of all, wanted to compliment your shoes. I'm obsessed with them.
Girl,
Speaking of
Old
color,
Navy.
I know. I
Have
thought I
those
heard
already
you say
colors.
Old Navy, and I'm very excited
Yeah,
because that
well,
means they're even cheaper than
Polka
I was
dots,
hoping
they got
for.
Ochre.
Ochre.
So Jaclyn, I followed you for a while. I actually used to run Dinner Lab. We met kind of in that whole
Yes,
iteration,
yeah.
and it's been years. But two things. One, I'm so inspired by the information you shared. I felt like I'm really hoping someone's taking notes somewhere, like in a better, thank
In the
you.
Notes
So,
app?
because there's like so much good nuggets that I'm excited to like share and repost. Two things. Your comment on talking about what people are getting paid and women should be more open about that. I actually just took that on in myself because I went to an event And they were talking about how when you kind of broach negotiations, you should just add 20K because you're uncomfortable with it. And case in point, 2 weeks later, I got into negotiations. They say, what's your range? That's always the famous thing. And I'm like, okay, 85 to 100K. That's my range. And that was already higher than I was. So I'm like, that's uncomfortable there. And the recruiter, which was actually a man who I'm very thankful for and I see as an ally, said, so the base of this role is 125. And I was like, oh, I just meant like if you just wanted me to be local based or like I had to like backpedal. But yes, that's totally fine, you know? So I just wanted to share that as a whole with
amazing,
everyone because there is money on the table, and if we don't kind of get ourselves there.
I had someone once say in an interview that their base was 50 to 200,000, or like their range, and I was like, what? And I was like, it's kind of genius because you're like, I have no idea where we should land. Like, what? I don't know what to do. It was hilarious. It was like one of my favorite things.
But what's great, and I'll share quickly because I am about being transparent in this conversation because I think it helps all of us. I landed on ended up getting a $90,000 raise, which was completely life-changing for me. So yeah, I'm getting emotional. But my question is, so as part of being in food, I've decided to launch a kind of a side project called Femmes in Food because I collect women in food, so it's like a women in food collective. Because I really think that we need to your point of Create and Cultivate, women in food don't have a platform to kind of go to each other, and I wanted to kind of organize it a little bit. So my question is, how do you balance, I want it to be kind of created from my own creative direction as well, but also I want to serve that community and let them decide kind of let them tell me what they need and then build that. So how do you kind of?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you should do what you think. Like go with your gut, go with your brand, launch it, get it out there, and then ask for feedback. Because I think if you get feedback too early on, it's going to just like, oh, shit, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. Like, maybe I should do this. I think it's just going to muddle the message, and you're going to have too many voices in your head. So I think launch it, pilot it for like a month, then get some people to go to your events, and then like, do feedback. I think like a good example of this is when I launched Create and Cultivate, our tagline was, an online platform offline conference series for female entrepreneurs. I can't tell you how many emails we got that were like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm really into this, so I guess this doesn't apply to me. And I was like, oh, no, wait. And then other people who were like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I just have this Etsy shop that I do on the side. I'm like, no, you are an entrepreneur. If you are doing, and women, number one, had such a hard time calling themselves an entrepreneur unless they were successful. So unless they had a successful business, they weren't an entrepreneur. Not true. And the other part was people who were just like, I'm just genuinely interested in like career and growth and like building maybe building a business. I don't know. And but I feel like this feels like it's for people who are successful. And so we had to change the tag. I was like, change the tagline, take it down. So we basically changed it for women looking to create and cultivate the career of their dreams to make it more open, more approachable. And so that was something I wouldn't have learned if I didn't launch. And kind of came into play like 3 or 4 months later.
I feel like side hustle has become like that, like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur, I just have a side hustle. And so it's not as like official, but it's still something I'm like,
gives you room to
really want to do.
Yeah.
I feel like it gives me room to fail if I say it's a side hustle.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna go over here.
Hi. 2 questions. 1, do you have a board at Create Cultivate? And 2, if you do, can you talk a little bit about how you went about choosing board members and that process and everything that goes into it?
Yeah, so we don't have a board, which is like very rare. So I have 3 partners in the company. They're all silent, so they don't really participate anymore. So at the very beginning of the company, they were hugely instrumental in the sense that one ran a digital talent agency, and so she was able to help with talent. The other ones ran a brand agency. They were able to help with new business. And then eventually, a couple years in, we just kind of started running operationally on our own. So obviously they're there when I need them, but really I'm just sort of solo. I'm just out here by myself. But it's been interesting because we get asked that question quite a bit. And I think for us, we're very protective of our equity and like what we're building. And I think I trust very much my partners. They're almost like my board, I would say, in a way, because anytime I'm like, is this the right move? They're always there to like give me that advice and sort of feedback, and knowing where to invest our money and when to do things and when to make big hires and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we don't have a board.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Just, I know you had early in your career a little breakup with your partner. How did that influence who you are today and who you partner with?
I mean, massively influenced. It like changed the whole trajectory of my entire life. But I had a business partner at my first company. We had a pretty bad business break. In the scheme of things now, I'm like, it wasn't that bad, but like a pretty bad business partner breakup for being like early 20s and like, you know, friends foremost and obviously dealing with all that stuff. But it was a massive learning and a massive lesson. And like looking back on it, I think like our biggest hurdle and biggest issue was lack of communication about money. There wasn't a clear conversation where we said, well, wait, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what do you want to do? And we had very fast success. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of money in the bank, and I'm approaching it in one way, they're approaching it in another way, and then that's where problems start. So if you have a co-founder or founder in their company, have those conversations up front. I mean, have conversations not only about, oh, where's like this, but be like, what do you want out of life? Like, do you want to be very rich? Like, or do you want like, and people have very clear answers about this. Like my husband's so funny. He's just like, I don't really care about money. I'm like, oh, what? It's crazy, but he's just like, I'm like, and it's amazing. It's great. He's the yin to my yang. But I'm very much a business person. I'm like, let's do this. Let's make money. And I love seeing other people making money as well. But I think there is different ways to run companies. Like you can be very conservative fiscally. You can be very like liberal with your money, and your hires, and you can not care about being profitable and really like try to break even, you know, whatever it is. It's like, you have to have those really hard conversations, up front. And in terms of looking for partners, like I said, the partners I have now are very uninvolved in a very good way. I think, you know, for me, they had connections I could never have. They had really, you know, the infrastructure I couldn't provide at the very beginning. And they got my business off the ground in many ways. And so I think that is a very interesting partnership because they were two companies when I took them on. So I took on two companies as partners, which is kind of a weird thing. But if you think about it, if you're starting a business, like let's just say, I mean, I'm making this, like Create and Cultivate is a good example. It's an events business that relies on having talent there. I was a consumer marketing expert, so I was bringing that value. They had digital talent that they could bring to the table. It's a perfect marriage and a perfect fit. And if we both are seeing upside, why not? So think strategically about partners. They don't have to be some person that you're like, we're co-founders. Another thing I would also say is that not everyone needs to be your co-founder. You can bring on people, give them equity in your company, and they can be the COO or the chief brand strategy or whatever the hell. Give them 10% of your company. Don't have to give them 50%. You don't have to have a co-founder. You can have someone that's equally as invested because they have equity, but they're not an equal to you. I talk so fast. I'm sorry in advance.
Okay.
I just want to ask more questions.
Want to go there, and then I'll go over there. That's so hard. How are we doing on time?
Hello, I believe I'm the only
Welcome.
male creature in the room. So I figure I would be the fitting person to ask this question. How can men in general do a better job supporting women in a sense of, I believe that there's unfortunately kind of like what you were talking about, right? There's just women, you know, fighting among each other, and same thing. I think it happens the same when it comes to men wanting to support women. There's this unfortunate toxic, whether it's masculinity or misunderstanding of feminism and all that stuff. I just want to hear your thoughts on, you know, in general, how can we do a better job collectively and specifically for dudes like me?
Yeah. I mean,
Besides
first of
being
all,
here.
can we all give him a round of applause for being here right now?
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's a couple different things. So I think if you're an employee in a company and you work with other women, I think there's different ways you can kind of support in that way. So I think first and foremost is if you have someone in your same title bracket talking about how much you're getting paid so that they know that they're getting paid equal. I think that's the hardest and biggest challenge that they have. And just saying like, hey, look, I'm willing to share with you how much I'm getting made so that we can have an honest conversation so that you make sure that you're getting paid equally. And then it's on them to go for it and ask for it. But I think like you've done your part in that conversation. I think the other thing would be in meetings oftentimes, and this goes for people of color as well, ideals will get thrown out by a woman or a woman of color where someone will say, oh, like I have this idea, blah, blah, and someone will be like, okay, great, anyway. So anyway, we're moving on. And then someone else will say that idea, or they'll keep pushing past it. And at that point, it's really important to echo that person. Like, actually, Julie was just saying this, and it's a really good idea. So having someone's back in those type of meetings, in those type of environments is so important. It's called an echo. So echoing someone's ideas that often get like put under the rug or not even like thought about, I think is a big one. I would also say, you know, from what's interesting now and what's been happening to a lot of my friends is that every male investor that they work with is like, I can't talk to you. Like, you're okay. Like, everyone's like terrified, right? Like, they're like, I don't want to help. And what's going to start to happen, which is very unfortunate, is men will no longer feel like they can mentor women because they're like, this is like, who knows? I don't want to like me too myself out of here. So I think, and it's like they're not bad guys. They just are nervous. Like, and I think that's really unfortunate. And I think like we need good men to really stand up and mentor those women. And a good example of this is actually, I was an early investor in Away Luggage, mostly because I was friends with Jen Rubio, and that's how I got in on that deal, right? So then I hung out with one of my friends who invested in a lot of things, and I was like, I invested in Away Luggage. And he was like, oh, you invest? I'll bring you into deals. And I was like, I didn't know that's how it happened. That's how it happens, guys. Like, that's how people invest in Uber and Twitter and whatever. They know someone that's there at the time. And so he started sending me deal flow. Like, here's this company, Thrive Market. Here's this company, this. Like, do you want to get in on the angel rounds? And like, I wouldn't have been able to have those conversations. And a lot of times the people in those rounds were not women. And so we have to create larger institutional wealth for women. You know, year over year we're getting there, but we can't become, it's going to take years of undoing what we've already been up against, but I think men can play a massive role in that, in creating more wealth, more opportunity for women, simply by showing up, being a voice, being an ally, and echoing the women in the room.
Thank you for that. And I do agree that, you know, I think rule number one is showing up, and a lot of times it's just the fact that people are too afraid to bring things up, or you know, for being men supporting women, people are like, well, you're not real men or whatever it is. And I do think that's unfortunate, you know, and yeah, hopefully one step at a time I'm taking. So
Yeah.
here I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, I hate this. I think your hand was hit. No, that's okay.
Hi. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. And I'm the founder of a small business called Bump and Blends, and I've been doing a lot of outreach for editorial and events and just trying to get our little business in some big voices. And so what do you recommend for a small business with a small budget, either A, where to put that small budget to get the most bang for your buck in terms of outreach and media and you know, being interviewed on a podcast, being in some big publication, or do you recommend not putting your money into that and waiting for opportunities to come to you?
So the number one thing I would say with editorial is if you're going out to, you know, a refinery or Pop Sugar or whatever it is, all of those companies pay freelancers a lot of money to write content for them. So I would not pitch them as write a story about me. I would say, I'm gonna write a story for you. Here's my angle. I'm a small business owner and I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Or I started my company with $4 in my pocket. You know, here's whatever it is, and offer them to write the pieces. For majority of the content that gets published on Create and Cultivate is people offering their services to write for us, because we are a very small editorial team. And it can't be like, here's an infomercial for my product. It really can be about like, I started this company and had to learn everything about manufacturing, and here's my 4 tips if you're looking to get into the side of business. Anything like that, and then you have a byline, you have a headline, and then you could put money against that, right? So like all the time, I'm sure in your Facebook feeds, you see like promoted Fastco articles or Forbes articles by the company they're about, right? Really, really smart. They get that article and then they promote the shit out of that article, because you're not gonna be like looking for a company that's promoting themselves, talking about themselves. You wanna look at a company who's getting promoted by a company that you know. So I think that's super important.
So brilliant. I haven't thought about that at all.
So I would definitely suggest that.
Beautiful. Very smart. Okay, I'm gonna go over there and then we'll do one more.
Hi, Jaclyn. My name is Courtney. I am a business and career coach, and my tagline is success without exhaustion for women. So what you have had such a huge success in a very short period of time at a younger age, and I would just love to know how, as you continue to scale, how do you take care of yourself? How do you manage the process of really scaling up in your business and taking care of you as a person?
I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I am the worst self-care person on earth, and I like always try to tell that to people because I think people. I'm like, I'm not manifesting crystals. I'm not doing any of it. I think that really started to happen like 2 to 3 years ago, where all of a sudden, like, I used to work out all the time. I was like, oh, I work out all the time. Now it's like, I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to do anything. But I will say, end of last year was an incredible year for us. You know, we closed the year. It was insane what we did. I was so mentally and physically exhausted. But I also started to reflect on the fact that, like, I am just a machine right now. Like, I'm literally just making lists, doing things, sending them, like, whatever. And I was like, and it's made us incredibly successful. It's also made me very depressed. And it was really, really hard to have that conversation with myself, because when you're seeing success, everyone's like, you're crushing it. But you're like, I don't see my friends. Like, I'm a shell of a human. And then, like, on the weekends, like, the free time I do have, I'm like binging Riverdale and like laying in my bed. And my husband's like, you're so weird.
At least you're doing that.
Yeah, at least that. So that is my version of self-care. But this year, I've definitely taken on a different approach to it. Well, first and foremost, we went from 9 people to 18 people starting at the end of this month. So we've scaled from an employment perspective, which is really, really important. So I've been able to take on the role of what more of you would think of as a CEO. I always like call myself a basement CEO, because I was like, yeah, I'm a CEO, but I'm like, literally, like, I'm like, we're out of toilet paper. I need to go buy something. Like, I'm doing everything. So I think for me, this year was really about getting my social life back, getting out there more, being more cognizant of burnout and like when I'm going to burn out. And then also getting back to the things I love and like doing new things and going to Pilates places and hanging out with friends and traveling and taking trips. My first vacation ever in the past 8 years was my honeymoon last year. And it was incredible. I went back to work the Monday after my wedding. Like, I got married on a Saturday. I was like back in the office on Monday. And it was the most incredible 2 weeks. And so it's like, every year we're going to take a 2-week vacation. Like, we're going to go someplace crazy and so much fun. So I'm going to Barcelona and Paris in the end of June. So recommendations, welcome. But I think it is a huge challenge. And I think I've seen it happen with businesses blow up, the founders in every article, amazing. And then I'm like, what happened to them? They burnt out. And I know them. I'm like, what happened to you? And they're like, well, I'm like teaching school in Japan now. You're like, what? You're like running this huge VC backed startup. And they're like, yeah, no, I just forget it. I think, and I get it. I get it. Like, founder depression is so real. And like, specifically if you're a solo founder, like, I get, it's exhausting. Like, look, it's like everything is on you. Every mistake, every fire, even if you didn't make it, even if just your employee did it, even if it's whatever, like, that is on you. You're gonna have to deal with it. That's a lot. A vacation for me is literally just not having to make decisions for 24 hours. Like, that sounds like heaven. But I mean, it's an amazing question. I think like your, specification, what you're focusing on is so important. And I think, I know I'm a constant work in progress. So
So am I.
Thank you.